I'm Heather Arnold, local history librarian here at Pakenham Libraries, and we're going to talk today about the history of Pakenham. So just the European history of Pakenham, and I grew up at Coral Lynn, but I went to Pakenham Consolidated School, and we used to go to the Presbyterian Church at Pakenham, so I knew Pakenham from the 1960s and 1970s, and if you know Pakenham now, it has changed quite a bit, like Bourke, like Cranbourne, like a lot of these towns in the area. It's gone from being that small country town to part of the city, part of the suburbs. So I'm going to share my screen. Oops, hang on, don't do that. Share screen. And we're here. Okay. Thank you. Oops, a daisy. What do I want to do? Get rid of that and go back to here. Okay. History of Pakenham. So this is a great view of Pakenham, probably 1900 or so. Looking across, that's this is Main Street. Oh, my mouse doesn't work to show you. But just on the right here is McAfee store, which became Robinson's store. We'll talk about that later. And this is a railway station, the railway station here in the background here. So that would be like Station Street today. So the original town of Pakenham, I'm trying to get the slide to change. Oh. The original town of Pakenham started off, was based around the Latrobe Inn on the Toomuc Creek. So this is the Toomuc Creek here, and that is what they call High Street, which is actually the Princess Highway or the Gippsland Road. And in 1849, 1850, Kitty and Michael Bourke established the Latrobe Inn, which is the hotel still there, as I said, on the corner of the Toomuc Valley, Toomuc Creek. And then the town developed around the hotel, but we'll tell you more about the hotel later on. And then, so that was the original township of Pakenham. And then in 1877, the railway went through from Melbourne to Sale, and the Pakenham railway station developed sort of south of the original town of Pakenham. And then the town that developed around the railway station was called Pakenham East for many years, and now those towns have combined. So when we talk about Pakenham, the original township, as I said, was on the highway, and then later on it developed around the railway station. So that's the earliest map I could find here, 1858. And there are the name of Pakenham. So there are four people that it has been suggested that Pakenham, the township of Pakenham, was named after. So this is the first one here, Major General Sir Edward Michael Pakenham, who served with the Duke of Wellington in the Peninsular War and was killed in 1815 at the Battle of New Orleans. So he's the first suggestion. It's also been suggested that it was named after his sister, who is this lady here, Catherine Pakenham, who was the wife of the Duke of Wellington. So, of course, her brother here served with his brother-in-law, the Duke of Wellington. So she's Catherine. Another suggestion is that it was named after another sibling of those two, another brother, the Very Reverend Henry Pakenham, who was Dean of St. Patrick's Cathedral from 1843 to 1863. I don't have a photo of him, but that's supposed to be his likeness on a not a gargoyle, whatever they call them. That's supposed to be his likeness, and that at the top here is St. Patrick's Cathedral at Dublin. So there's a book that we have, it was published in 1962, I'm holding it up but you can't see it, From Bullock Tracks to Bitumen, and it's a short history of the Shire of Berwick. And in that book, they say that when Captain Clark was surveying the area, his cousin, a naval officer named Pakenham, visited him. The two men agreed that the place should be named Pakenham after their grandfather, Very Reverend Pakenham, Reverend Pakenham, a Dublin minister, which is, as I said, this man here. So whether that story is true or not, I don't know. But there's another suggested person after whom the town was named, and it's this man here, Lieutenant Colonel Edward William Pakenham, who is a nephew of the previous three people. So he was killed at Inkerman during the Crimean War. Now, just because it's a bit confusing, I've done a mini family tree, which is here. So we start off with Edward Michael Pakenham, 2nd Baron Longford. They were an Irish aristocracy. And he had Catherine, Duchess of Wellington, Major General Sir Sir Edward Michael Pakenham, who was killed at the Battle of New Orleans. Their brother, Sir Hercules, who for some reason doesn't get a Guernsey when it comes to the naming of Pakenham, but his son, it is suggested it may have been named after his son. And finally, another sibling or child was the very Reverend Henry Pakenham of the Dean of St. Patrick's at Dublin. So that's how the family works. There's also been a suggestion, there's a book I have called Place Names of Victoria by Les Blake, and he actually suggests that the original name of Pakenham was Longford, which of course would tie in with the whole Pakenham family. My view is, and many people think I'm wrong, but I believe I'm correct, that it is this man here that Pakenham was really named after, and he was the one who died during the Crimean War. And that's because there are so many places in Victoria with a Crimean War connection, and that took place like around the same time Pakenham was being settled. I don't know, I still feel it's him, but I may be wrong. So he, if you consider the town of Sebastopol near Ballarat, the town of St Arnaud that was named after a Crimean War general, in Balaclava, the suburb in Melbourne, and in neighbouring St Kilda, there's a whole pocket of Crimean War streets such as Inkerman Street, Alma Road, Crimea Street and Redden Road, all named after Crimean War personalities. And even in Cranbourne, we have Clarendon Street, Codrington Street and Lyon Street, who all have a Crimean War connection. So I believe that it's this man here that Pakenham was named after. But either way, if it wasn't him, it was one of his relatives. So that's the Pakenham name. Pioneers. Now, as in all places in Victoria, of course, the original inhabitants were the Indigenous people, the Aboriginals. And in this area here, it was, of course, members of the part of the Bunurong tribe who were part of the Kulin Nation. But as in all areas, from the 1830s onwards, squatters arrived and took up the land that was previously occupied by the Aboriginal people. And in this area, it was, of course, no different. So the main squatting runs in the area I.Y.U here and Toomuc, which is here. And they're both based around the Toomuc Creek. This is Kurup here. Garrett Mayoon, that's basically, we looked at this a while ago, that's where Cranbourne is. So, and this was the original station here down the bottom here, south of the Kurup Swamp. So the I.Y.U station was taken up by Dr. William Jamison Kerr in 1839. He had something like 5,200 hectares, and he was a doctor in great demand as a doctor. And he moved in 1850 to the Latrobe, somewhere near the Latrobe Valley on the Latrobe River, and he is said to have given his name to the town of Jamison, which is just north of Walhalla or south of Mansfield. So after Jamison left, the land was taken over by William Waddell, who, when he died, his widow Annie built the I.Y.U Homestead. It's a beautiful place. Sadly, it was burnt down in a fire around 1929, but I mean, imagine having the house still in Pakenham today. So that's the I.Y.U Homestead, built by Annie Waddell. And I.Y.U, I haven't really found an explanation as to why it was called or what it means, I.Y.U. The only thing I found is that David Mickle, in his book History of Kurup, the history of Kurup Swamp and Kurup, he suggests that I.Y.U was the nearest approach to the pronunciation of the name by the Aborigines to the creek running through the estate. So I don't know whether that's true or not, but it is an unusual name. So after the Waddells left the I.Y.U estate, it was taken over by George Watson, who was master of the Melbourne Hounds, and then it was taken over by John Kitchen and Sons. So John Kitchen and Sons were soap manufacturers, and they started in Melbourne in 1859 making soap and candles, and by the 1880s were the largest soap and candle makers in Australia. That was their brands. In 1918, they joined with the firm Lever and became Lever and Kitchen. I think they're Unilever today. So they made candles and soap in Melbourne, and then they took over the I.Y.U estate here in Pakenham, and they became the biggest dairy farm in Australia. They had two sides, so they were both sides of McGregor Road, and they milked 300 cows on one side and 300 cows on the other side of McGregor Road on the Green Hill property. So Green Hills Road, if you know that in Pakenham, is sort of the general area where they were. So 600 cows, all milked by hand, which is a remarkable achievement, and there were they employed up to 60 people. But the 1890s depression caused a bit of a slump, and they had to sell the I.Y.U property. However, they then also had other land north of the highway up Toomuc Valley Road, the Toomuc Valley Orchards, and they had established them. And they were indeed the biggest orchards in the state. So the biggest soap manufacturers, the biggest dairy, biggest orchards. I don't know if any of this is true or they're just very good at self-promotion, but whatever it was, that was the John Kitchen and Sons who had this role to play in Pakenham's history. The other side of the Toomuc Creek was the Toomuc Run. And that's where today's town of Pakenham is based, on the Toomuc Run. And that was taken up by Captain John Wedge Howie and Robert Patterson in 1839. It was later taken over by James Bathy. And we'll talk more about that property later on. So we'll go back to the Bourkes. So in around 1843, Michael and Kitty Bourke took up Minton's Run on the Toomuc Creek at Pakenham. And this was 12,800 acres. I go from acres to hectares, sorry. Sometimes I use acres, sometimes I use hectares. A lot of land. Anyway, they were there from 1843, but they decided around 1849, 1850 that they would build a hotel, which they did. And it was known as a hostelry of high repute and had good accommodation. And they operated the hotel and the post office. Also, they had the post office there. And they operated that, Michael and Kitty, together until 1877 when Michael died. And Catherine continued to run both the post office and the hotel with the help of her daughter Celia. And all this time, she was operating this hotel and the business and running the farm. And she gave birth to 14 children between 1839 and 1864. So she was a remarkable woman, I believe. This is a photo here of their daughter Celia and her nephew, Father John Bourke. If you know Pakenham at all, you would know that the Bourkes have played a pivotal role in the development of Pakenham. They've been councillors, they've been football players, and they helped establish the Pakenham Race Club, which used to be in Pakenham. They moved out to Tynong. And the early races were held on the property of Michael and Kitty's nephew, David Joseph Bourke. And we'll talk about him later as well. But you know, you can't look at the history of Pakenham without looking at the history of the Bourke family. And there's still Bourkes around in the area as well. They just played such a contribution. There's a photograph going around that I've seen. I should have found it again, of a Pakenham Football Club photo from the 1950s, and half of them are Monktons and half of them are Bourke. So the entire football team. So the Monckton family as well. There's a lot of sons in that family. So you know, there's been a few big families in Pakenham that have contributed, especially to the sporting life of Pakenham. So the Bourkes themselves had. This is David Joseph Bourke, who, as I said, helped establish the Pakenham Racecourse. And if you knew where the old Pakenham Racecourse was, just north of the railway line, off Station Street, the original races were run on one of his paddocks, and then the racecourse was established. The Bourkes had arrived with other Irish migrants from Shanagolden in Ireland. It was in County Limerick. So there's the Shanagolden retirement village in Pakenham, named because of the local Irish connection to Shanagolden in County Limerick. They had arrived with other families, and a lot of them moved to Pakenham. So along with the Bourkes, there were the Dawes. There's Daw Road in Nannagoon, and the O'Briens. And the O'Briens had established a hotel, the Limerick Arms Hotel, on the corner of Wilson Road and the Gippsland Road, Princess Highway, in the 1860s, and their son established the Nannagoon Hotel. So, you know, those Irish immigrants had quite a large role to play in the development of this area. So the Toomuc estate, as I said, was later on taken up by Dr. James Bathy, and then it was taken over by Thomas Henty. So Henty Road in Pakenham is named after Thomas Henty and his family. And he'd been born in Launceston and took up the land in 1865. Once again, you can't look at Victoria's history without looking at Tasmania's history, because there's every time you do a history talk, you think, oh, they like the Ruffy brothers who started off in Tasmania from who then established themselves in Cranbourne. They started in Tasmania, then they moved to Victoria, and so Victoria was almost initially colonised by Tasmanians. So it's an interesting sort of part of our history. So Thomas Henty took up Pakenham Park, which is part of the original Toomuc run, and he was on the Berwick Shire Council and a Shire Councillor, member of the Legislative Council. He was interesting for a few reasons. First of all, they donated the land that the original Church of England was built on in Pakenham. We'll show you a photo of that later on. But they also had a quarry on their property, hence this big hole here. So this is up near where the old council offices were, off the top of the hill there at Pakenham. And this was originally a quarry, and the quarry was used to supply stone for the construction of the Melbourne to Sale railway line. At one stage also, they had something like 400 men camped on their property on Henty Hill, and these men worked either in the quarry or worked on the railway line. So it was, sort of interesting. And down the bottom here, we have a photo of their lily pond, which is still there in a state of quite neglect, I believe, quite neglected. And they supply lilies to the cut flower market, I believe. So that's interesting. Still there, it should be restored. So now a town develops. So as I've said before in my talks, the first thing that a town has is usually a hotel, then churches and a school, and no different in Pakenham. So we had the hotel, we had Bourke's Hotel established in 1850, and then later on we had the first church built. There would have been church services held earlier on, perhaps in people's houses and everything, but the first church in Pakenham was St Patrick's Church, built just further down the highway on the corner of McGregor Road. It's still there as part of St Patrick's Primary School and St Patrick's Church, and it's now used as part of it's part of the school, but used as a hall now. So that's the original St Patrick's Church, and it was placed in 1976 by the new modern church. So that was on the highway, and then further up towards the Toomuc Creek was the original Pakenham State School, which opened in 1875, and it moved later on to the Main Street location. So if you knew where the old Pakenham Consolidated School was in Main Street, just where the retirement village there now, there's a retirement village everywhere in Pakenham, of course. This is the Pakenham Primary School that opened up in the original Pakenham township of Pakenham, and then moved later on in 1891 to a Main Street location. Sort of once again indicates the fact that by then the Pakenham East township that was built around the railway station was eclipsing the old Pakenham town that was on the Toomuc Creek. And it did that because, of course, the railway station was opened in October 1877. There had been, as I said last week, only from Dandenong to Pakenham, there was a Dandenong station, the Berwick station and the Pakenham station, only the three original stations that opened in October 1877. And this one here is very early shot of the Pakenham railway station. So that is the railway. On the left here would be where the racecourse is. I came across this photo here of, this is a Public Records Office photograph taken about the 1960s of the Main Street level crossing. If you know Pakenham now, you'd know that it doesn't look like this. So this building here, can't get my mouse to work to point it to you. This building, hang on, here is the goods shed. And that's where on this side here was, if you knew Porter's Farm Service, that used to operate here. So, of course, we have the railway station develop, and then, of course, the first thing that comes after that would be a hotel. This was, go back to my notes here. This was the original, it was called the original you'll recognise the building. That's what the building looks like today. It was built 1929, but originally it was built just after the railway station was established. You know, I've got various dates, 1877, 78, 1880. I'd say it was more likely built 1878. I can't imagine it took them 2 years to build a railway station near a hotel in those days. So there was originally the Gembrook Hotel and later became called the Pakenham Hotel. And it was built by Daniel Bourke, who we saw before, who established the Pakenham Racecourse, and he was a nephew of Michael and Kitty Bourke, and he established this hotel. Still going strong. That's what it looks like. So we have the original church in Pakenham was the Catholic Church, built on the highway, and then diagonally opposite that was the Anglican Church, St James Anglican Church, built on land in 1884, donated by Thomas Henty, and it was named St James in honour of his father. It's interesting that it was built, had a bit both ways really, because by then the town had moved from the Toomuc Creek really to be around the railway station, but they built this halfway between both towns, so the Anglicans were you know, trying to accommodate both Pakenham and Pakenham East when they built this building. The building's still there on the corner of Main Street and McGregor Road, and it was used for a council community centre. Not sure what it's used for now, but it is still there. So, and there's a new Anglican church built north of the highway. I'm not actually sure what road it's on, but somewhere north of the highway. So, Presbyterian Church was 1906. So that's where the Uniting Church is. This is a picture of Main Street, Pakenham, 1906. So the Uniting Church is just up in the corner of Main Street and John Street, and this was the 1906 building. And right opposite it was the Methodist Church, built 1914. Now you can sort of see what Protestant architecture looks like. Very basic and very plain. No money wasted on anything fancy there. So the Presbyterian Church there was a new brick church replaced. The new brick church was built in front of it in about 1960, and the original building was, I believe it was turned around so like 90 degrees, and it was made as part of the Sunday school. That's since been demolished. And then opposite it, as I said, was the Methodist Church. So in 1977, the Methodists, the Congregationalists, and the Presbyterians all voted to unite and become the Uniting Church. So most towns had a redundant church, and in Pakenham the redundant church was a Methodist church, which was still there until about I don't know, 1986, 87, and then it was demolished. So they were the four main churches in Pakenham. We had the 2 hotels, the 4 churches, and of course the school and the railway station, and many shops, which is what we're going to look at now. Just quickly run through my notes to see if I've missed anything. Oh, okay. Actually, by 1890, we'll just backtrack a bit. By 1890, actually, we'll look at this one. 1888, St Patrick's School opened. It had 35 pupils. 1890, there were residential lots in King, Anderson, Henry Street, and the northeast side of James Street was all subdivided. 1911, there's 55 houses in Pakenham. So this would be about 1911, I'd say. And on the left here is McAfee's General Store. Now this was taken over in 1925 by Mr. Robinson. If you grew up in Pakenham or know anything about Pakenham, you know Robinson's store. They had a store there on the corner of Main Street and just up from the hotel. I don't know what the street's called, Main Street, and they were there from 1925 until the new Safeways complex was built in the 1980s. And so McAfee started the store as a general store, and it was taken over by Robinson's in 1925, and he sold groceries, drapery, boots, shoes, produce, and ironmongery. So this is looking up towards McGregor Road, and this next photo here is looking towards the railway station. So this is again McAfee's store here, and then this is the railway station over here. So this would be Station Street. And another one, once again, we have McAfee store here, and this building here would be the old, the original Gembrook Hotel before it was replaced by the two-storey building. And across the back here is the railway station. I love this photo. It's a great photo. It's not a one-horse town, it's a one-bullock town. So, and another view, it's another postcard of Pakenham. There's Paternoster store. I'm not actually sure the location of that in Main Street, but Paternoster started in Berwick in 1862, and they had a store at Pakenham as well. I should try to find the date. However, if you know Pakenham, you know that it has changed quite a bit since then. So a lot of these photos I've got are from a book which I should have showed you before we started, called North of the Line, a Victoria record compiled by the Berwick Pakenham Historical Society. So it looks at, I'm showing you the photo, but you can't see it, of course. It looks at, it has a whole lot of photographs of early Pakenham and other towns north of the line, north of the railway line, including Tyne, Garfield, Bunyip, etc., Cockatoo. It's a great book. So the Berwick Pakenham Historical Society have a little museum in Pakenham, and once COVID-19's under control, well, hopefully they'll be reopening. So that is the first car allegedly in Pakenham. You can just imagine, you can just imagine how many people must have turned out to see this first car in Pakenham. I mean, Pakenham was a country town, and like, to just think, it'll just be like having a spaceship land, wouldn't it? To see a motor car after having a horse and cart or something like that. It's just an amazing thing to think that this was the sort of start of the motor car dominating our life, for good, I think. But anyway, Pakenham Gazette. You can't really talk about the history of Pakenham without looking at the Pakenham Gazette. It started off in 1909. It was established by Albert Thomas in Berwick, and it was originally the Berwickshire News. And then in 1917, it moved to Pakenham, and the Pakenham Gazette was produced. The Pakenham Gazette is still going strong, like 111 years, and it's still produced by the Thomas family. It was taken over by Albert Thomas, started it, and then it was taken over by his son Herb, then his son Ian, and then now Paul Thomas, fourth generation, still runs the Pakenham Gazette, or Star News as they call it now. And it was produced for many, many years in this tiny little weeny office in Main Street in Pakenham. This is right next to the old Shire offices, which had a modern facade put on in 1962. But this little building's still there. Next door to the Gazette was Miss Thomas, who was Herb's sister, and apparently she was a proofreader and worked very hard. Miss Thomas was also the first Shire of Berwick secretary. Like, she was quite a pioneer when it came to a role in local government, females in local government. So the Thomas family owned the house next door. I'm sure it was Miss Thomas who lived there, and then behind them was the Thomas family as well. So as I said, you can't really look at the history of Pakenham without looking at the history of the Pakenham Gazette, which has been recording our history for like 111 years and still family owned. I think that's a remarkable achievement when so many country newspapers and so many newspapers have been taken over by the big conglomerates like the leader newspapers, that, we still have our own local newspaper in Pakenham. We looked last week at the original Shire of Berwick offices, which were built in Berwick, of course, and then in 1912 or 1902 actually, they moved to Pakenham, and then they had meetings in the Mechanics Institute in Pakenham, and then they opened these offices here in Main Street, corner of John Street, in 1912. So there was the Shire office in the corner. Right next door was Herb Thomas's, the Pakenham Gazette, and then Miss Thomas's house, and right next door to that was the Presbyterian Church. We're very lucky. We're very lucky these buildings still exist, because there was some talk about demolishing it, but they were moved. This is further along Main Street to the a corner on the side on the corner opposite the Anglican Church, corner of McGregor Road and Main Street and the highway, and it's now the headquarters of the Berwick Pakenham Historical Society. So we are lucky it's been preserved. And all the years that it was there in 1962, as I said, this incredibly ugly brick facade was built. We'll show you a photo of that later on. Was built all around it, but the actual interior of the office remained intact. And if you get a chance, once they reopen, you should really go up and visit this building if you haven't seen it, because inside the original council chambers are still there, wood line ceiling. Like, it's just the most beautiful building inside. It's just a lovely building, and so lucky that it's been maintained and been retained. Oh, and that's the next lot of council offices. They were at the top of the hill. They're up Cunningham Way in Pakenham, and have been replaced, of course, again by this new building in Officer. I think it's, I mean, personally, I can't speak for the council, of course. I thought it was a shame that, you know, they moved out of Pakenham, but the Shire of Pakenham now has sort of changed its demographic, and apparently this is the demographic centre of Pakenham, not the geographic, but the demographic centre. So that's why the council offices were built up in Officer. So I still think it's not quite as pretty as this building, but, you know, councils have changed over the years. So an example of another shop that opened in Pakenham was the Auction Mart, which just sounds like eBay. It's just like eBay. They offered everything. Opened in 1917. And they, you can see here, this is the corner of Station Street. Here, that's the level crossing here, Main Street level crossing. Looking across there, I think it's the Old Mechanics Institute. I haven't got a picture of that, so I'm not really sure. And this is the, but yeah, so that's a general area. So just there now would be that building on the corner, that two-storey white building, which is now the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence op shop, and was the Hardy's hardware store at one stage. But the Auction Mart sold pigs, calves, poultry, horses, cattle, jinkers, disc ploughs, separators, and useful sundries. There you go. Anything you wanted, it sounds like you could have got the Pakenham Auction Mart. It just sounds, I say, like eBay. I presume everything was auctioned. So it's a shame that still isn't there. So we're just looking at the history of some of the buildings in Pakenham. This was the Pakenham Post Office, built 1925 in Georgian Revival style. And there's an exact same building. This exact same building was built in Elwood at the same time, which I just found out the other day. So it's quite, I remember this one was demolished in maybe the 1990s. And it was on the same location as this current post office, which is not so exciting, I don't think. But anyway, that's what it looks like now. But that's what it did look like. It's a great looking building. Yeah. But of course, you know, it had steps. It wasn't particularly, it had bad access and everything like that. But, you know, it was still quite an attractive building. 1928, electricity came to Pakenham around the same time as Berwick and Cranbourne. I just have this slide in for when I do talk to school kids, as I say, because they just like to, we just like to talk about what life was like before electricity. And as I've said before, it just blows them away when you say no telephones, no Nintendo, no Wii, no PlayStations, no anything like that. They just can't understand it. Of course, there was none of that in my day either, but, you know, electricity, how it just, like the motor car, it's one of those technological advancements that have really changed people's lives. My father grew up on Main Drain Road at Coralline, and they didn't get electricity there till after the war. It was around 1955. My parents were married in 1956, and then they just had electricity on, because my mother had come from Coburg, and of course, you know, I can imagine what it would have been like if she had to move down to Coralline with no electricity. But it was quite late in some rural areas. And then my auntie, who married in 1955, she moved out to North Garfield, and there was no electricity there for a while. So you just can't. I just don't know why she even moved. I think I would have just stayed at Coralline, but it was just hard to. I just can't imagine life without electricity. I just can't imagine. Anyway, so it's really played a great role in our life. Now, hospital. So Pakenham's always been lucky. Well, it had been lucky. They had quite a good hospital. There was a bush nursing hospital. The bush nursing hospital movement started around, I think it was 1918, and the first bush hospital was, so they were community hospitals, and they were funded by the community. The community had to provide a building and pay for a nurse, a super qualified nurse who would come there, and then she would deal with any issues that were there. And then they had to provide accommodation and wages for the nurse. So the first bush hospital, I think, was in Beach Forest, and Coorab had a bush nursing hospital, one of the really early ones. I think it was established 1918. And Berwick had one, a bush nursing hospital, and Pakenham also had a bush nursing hospital. The Pakenham Hospital opened originally in Rogers Street in 1926, with Sister Kerbel in charge. In the first year, the hospital treated 110 medical and surgical cases and 45 midwifery cases. And in 1928, this building was built on the Princess Highway, funded by the community and by subscriptions and patient fees. So they were private hospitals in that sense. It was still going in 1990. So this is an advertisement from a community newsletter in 1990. Why not suggest to your general practitioner that they admit you to our magnificent new facilities offering acute medical surgery, midwifery surgery in the care of a qualified nursing sisters. They have air-conditioned wall-to-wall carpets, internal courtyards, etc. So this is a great little ad for the Pakenham Hospital. But sadly, like a lot of hospitals, it closed down in the 1990s, and there's now Millhaven, the old folks' home, Millhaven nursing home, and it's got a dementia ward and everything. I mean, it still provides medical services. It's like the hospital at Coorab. That closed down about the same time. I think they started rationalising hospitals, and Coorab is now Kalara, the nursing home as well. But you know, it just seems a shame. But I guess things have changed. So this is another photo of the hospital. I'm getting a bit nostalgic here. Sorry. Yeah, this is the bush nursing hospital in the 1990s. So, like all towns, Pakenham developed a whole lot of community groups. There's just a bit of a list here. The Cricket Club, the Agricultural Society, the Red Cross 1915, RSL, Girl Guides. I was surprised to find the Girl Guides actually started before the Scouts did, because they were at 1931, and the CWA was established the same year. Infant Welfare Centre was established in 1935, and the first Infant Welfare Centre sister was Sister Hollands. There was two sisters, and the children's centre, the new children's centre in Pakenham, Hollands Children's Centre, was named after the first infant welfare centre infant welfare sister in Pakenham. So that's just some of the groups. Masonic Lodge is still going strong. RSL is still going. Yeah. That's just a picture of the Scout Hall in 1937. There was talk it was going to be demolished, but it was saved by public outcry. And I think it's good. I think there's so few historic buildings left in Pakenham that I'm glad it's still there. Now, we'll get to Pakenham Consolidated School. So the original Pakenham State School was established in 1875 near the Toomuc Creek. And then it moved into Main Street, Pakenham, 1891. But in 1951, it became the Pakenham Consolidated School, which is where I went to school every single day for 7 years on the school bus from Coralline to Pakenham Consolidated School. So in the 1940s and 50s, there was a movement to consolidate small rural schools into one larger school. It was partly, especially after the war, there was a shortage of teachers, and there was also a shortage of materials and labour, and many schools fell into disrepair. So the Education Department decided Pakenham would be one of the first of the 6 consolidated schools, and all schools within 8 k's or 5 miles would be closed, and beyond that, schools would have the option to either consolidate or to remain on their own. So the Consolidated School opened in May 1951. The headmaster was Mr. Hicks, who was still there when I was there back in the 60s. They offered classes up to Form 4 or Year 10. And the schools that formed the Consolidated School were Pakenham Upper, Pakenham South, Toomuc Valley, Army Road, Mount Burnett, Tynong, Tynong North, Nanagoon North, Nanagoon South, Withdale, Officedale, Coralline and Coorab North. So some communities appreciate the fact that their children would get a better education in the sense that they were offered more sort of different facilities and had different range of subjects. But of course, the other disadvantage is that once your school leaves the community, well then you don't have a meeting place and you don't have that sort of community focus. So there's good things about consolidation and there are bad things about consolidation. So a whole new school was built, and just a few photos here. not particularly good one, sorry. This is one here. It's now, the school's still there. It's moved out to further along the highway, Rundle Way, in 1997. And I was, this is back in the 1980s after I'd left school, but I just like these Grenda's buses, because as I said, every single day I went to school on a school bus. I went to Pakenham Consolidated School, then Kurup High School on the school bus. And for some reason, because we lived at Coralline, so the very edge of the border for Pakenham Consolidated School, very edge of the catchment group for Kurup High School, we're often the first people on the bus and the last people to get home. And I didn't think it at the time, but like I spent about an hour every day, more than an hour every day on the school bus. And but I put down my years of travel on the school bus to my strong immune system, because I don't often get the flu. In fact, never had the flu, and don't get cold. So I feel that, you know, spending all this time on the school bus in like this confined capsule of germs, it's given me immunity to every germ that's ever around. So I could be wrong, but that's what I think. So that's about bus. And then here we are, just a nostalgic look. That's me in 1967. I'm here in the third row here. On the first row, third from there. Mr. Coonahan, grade 3 I was. Yeah. But it was quite a large school, 550 kids. I mean, you know, it was quite large, but anyway. You just go to school in those days and you have to think about anything. Right, sorry. Now, we've got the school. So the interesting thing about the Pakenham Consolidated School is that not only, like, it had many it helped Pakenham develop as a town, because, of course, it brought a lot of kids into the town. It brought their parents into the town, and it also there's a lot of teachers there. I mean, must have been 550 pupils. There was maybe 50 teachers or staff there. So I mean, that's all part of adds to the economic wealth of a town, to have all the teachers living there and working there. So it was good for the town in that sense. There's the Pakenham Hall. You may remember the old Pakenham Hall opened in 1959, and it's been demolished now. It's where the Pakenham Library is. My sister was married in 1918. She had her wedding reception at the Pakenham Hall, which many locals might remember having their wedding reception at a local hall. And it's now been replaced by the big new hall community centre complex and the library. So we talked about industry in the sense, or employment in the sense of what the Pakenham Consolidated School could provide, but Pakenham has also been lucky that there were other big industries in the town. This is Plummer's International Dealership. They were in Station Street. You may remember them. This is the railway station down here. It's hard to believe. This is taken 1947, this photo. Really hard to believe now, if you consider what Station Street looks like. And this is just another shot of them. It's just an interesting building that later became Pakenham Produce, which is an old photo here, which I pinched from their Facebook page, I have to say. And then Pakenham Produce have since moved out further down to Bald Hill Road, and this building's been demolished. But this is sort of Pakenham from my youth, you know, the sort of 60s and 70s. Yeah. So, of course, the biggest provider of employment in Pakenham is Nestles, which started off as Raleighs Preserving Company, established in 1952, and it was a vegetable canning factory. And they employed, in 1952 when they opened, they employed over 60 people, which is a huge amount of staff considering how big Pakenham was. And in fact, Pakenham was so small, this was an advertisement from 1956 it was, and they still had to get, they advertised for women from Dandenong to go and work at their factory at Pakenham, because there clearly weren't enough people in Pakenham to staff it. And then they provided daily transport, which must have been a bus. So it's interesting that, and also, of course, back in the days when you advertised for women and girls, now you can't do that these days, but you could in those days. So the Raleighs Preserving Company, which was, as I said, a vegetable cannery, was taken over by Nestles, or Nestle, as they call it these days, Nestle, in 1960. And another huge employer of people in Pakenham and the surrounding districts. Like you can't look at the history of Pakenham without looking at the history of Nestles. It was just the most, you know, just provided so much employment for the town. And this is two photos taken in from the State Library in 1964. They made baby food and canned foods, and there's two photos of the Nestles production line. Nestles sold in 2009 to Simplot, and they've sold out again to Paddy's Pies, who started a country business, who started at Bansal, and they've moved some of their manufacturing to Nestles at Pakenham. And probably employ less people than what they did when they started, but you know. Yeah. So Hutt Mill was a barrow stock. They make animal feed products starting in 1970. If you look at the amount of I'm quite into trucks, but some people hate trucks. But if you look at the amount of B-double loads of grain that come down from the Western District or Southern New South Wales, they go to Hutt Mills at Pakenham, they go to the feed mill at Clyde, or as they go down to Brownstock feed at Langley. There's just tons and tons and tons of wheat product that comes, grain products that comes to this area every day to feed these three big factories. So this is Hutt Mills at Pakenham. Been going for 50 years. And orchards. So, you know, it's hard to imagine now that Pakenham was once a rural area, but it had a lot of orchards all of the way up Ahern Road, Army Road. Those places were all orchards. They had a, just quickly find this, cool store. In 1925, Pakenham cool stores were established, and the cool store was built at Bald Hill Road. But there used to be a cool store, must be the same one, up the back of the new Pakenham Place, Pakenham Marketplace complex. Even when I was a girl at school in the 1960s, which was years ago, of course, there was a, so I'll just get this phone and stop this phone. Even when I was a girl at school, there's many orchards around Pakenham, and it was really known all throughout the hills. There's Narry North and Upper Beaconsfield, Officer, etc. All big orchard areas. Garfield North, still some orchards there, but they were quite predominant around Pakenham, and of course farms. So Pakenham was really a had a lot of dairy farms. It wasn't so much not like the Kirrup Swamp, which is more vegetable production, but had many dairy farms and grazing farms. But Pakenham was a centre where farmers would come to do their normal transactions. So it had the better shops, and it had, you know, Porter's Farm Service. It had all those ancillary businesses that would support the surrounding farm areas. So if you didn't go to Pakenham, you might have gone to Warrigal. But Pakenham was the place the farmers coming to do their shopping and things like that, including people like us from Coralline. In fact, my mother from Coralline still goes to Pakenham nearly about 3 times a week to do all her shopping. So, and the Victorian Livestock Exchange, which was opened in 1999, probably about to close down soon. But once again, that's another example of rural industry in Pakenham, like Hutt Mills, like the orchards, like the farming areas. And they've been going now for 21 years. So here's some photos of Main Street shops. So this is a great little map of 1964 of what Pakenham looked like then. So this is Main Street here. That's the out here, the highway would be Bourke Road. That's where David Bull is on the corner. A bit further along is the old Pakenham Hotel, and this is all that was in Pakenham in 1964. It's Main Street here. So this is Pakenham in 1960s. That's the hotel down the corner here, the Pakenham Hotel. The newsagents here. Post office would be, can't see it. There's another great photo around the same time, 1960s. This is this two-storey building, which was Hardy's hardware store, which is now which is where Auction Mart was. That's the railway crossing here. And another one. So this building here is the Shire offices, and as I said, in 1962 they had this sort of facade built on the side of, on the front of it. It's just incredibly ugly. So and that's the post office here. Yeah. And this is a bit later on, 1980s. Once again, the post office from 1980s, and still the same. So it was still the same sort of country town. So in about 1986, Safeways was built. We'll just go through these photos. and that's Robinson's supermarket there, which we saw this photo originally. McAfee's original general store, it was on this location where Robinson's SSW supermarket was, and they also, it's now Cheapest Chips, but so the shop's still there. So this is Safeways, sort of about 1984. So this is where Woolies was. Priceline Chemist is here. So it's so when this was built in the mid-80s, this is really, in my mind, the end of Pakenham as a country town, because once your shops, my view is, once your shops move off Main Street into sort of the back streets, into these big shopping complexes, it loses its country town feeling, and it's just and the small stores are taken over by these large sort of chain stores. You know, I know it's progress. I think it's a shame though. So, you know, in my mind, the mid-80s was when Pakenham was sort of on the cusp of losing its country town feeling. So this here is where Target and Coles is now located. That's the Methodist Church there. That's the old Pakenham Library. Post office is here. And this is, as I said, where Woolies was, which is now closed down. And Priceline Chemist, Priceline Chemist is here. And these Pakenham Place shops, well, it's closed down now. We'll just quickly look at the libraries before we finish up, because, you know, I'm a librarian, we have to look at libraries. This was the old Pakenham Library being built in 1991, now Pakenham Central Shopping Centre. And that's what Pakenham Central, you'll see, that's old pictures of what it used to look like. All these houses were demolished. Pakenham Gardens, so that's where the library was. And then now Pakenham Shopping Centre, just another view of behind the main street. And that's what it looks like now, Pakenham Central. Entertainment. We'll whiz through some of these slides because I'm running out of time as usual. The pool, the outdoor pool, opened in 1963. There was quite an agitation a few years ago to get rid of the pool, but it's been saved. I think, you know, when you look at it, not much shade or anything, but I feel that, you know, it's a bit of a rite of passage going to the pool when you're young, and I think it's a good thing that they've still got the pool in Pakenham. So the outdoor pool, it's a lot different from an indoor pool. Yakkerboo Festival. So Yakkerboo Festival started in 1976. It was like a Moomba thing. I mean, they've still got Yakkerboo today. It's sort of changed a little bit now, of course, because all these festivals where you used to have all these community floats have changed because there's so much OH&S that have kicked in. But it started 4 years after the Currup Potato Festival, but it's still going, and Currup is not still going. So that was the original, one of the original ads for it, and this is some of the original floats. I think that your rates at work, I think they're having to go to some of the councillors there. So State Bank of Victoria no longer there, buildings no longer there. And this is Kidinia Shire float, and or Pakenham Shire was then, sorry. That's the hotel here. That's Hardy's two-storey hardware stop here, and that's the level crossing here. But of course, these days, you know, you couldn't have someone sit on the edge of a float like that without any railings or anything. So the whole thing has changed a bit. And this is a great photo. This is the Shire offices behind this facade I was talking about before. That's the Pakenham Gazette office. And next to that is the Uniting Church, which was the original Presbyterian Church. But the Yakkerboo Festival, it's still going strong. It was a bit different this year, of course, because of the COVID-19. But it is nice, and as all festivals in the early days also had a festival queen. You know, it was to raise money for local organisations. So all the surrounding areas would have a queen, and she'd raise money, and then they have a princess, and then the queen would be awarded whatever crown. The queen would be crowned at a ball. The other thing Pakenham had as far as recreation goes is open space. So this photo here is opposite the, I'll show you this one first. So that is the, that's the Pakenham Hotel, Michael and Kitty Bourke's hotel on the corner of Toomuc Creek and the Princess Highway. Oh, this one is. Oh, sorry. No, it must be this one. Anyway, it's looking towards that hotel. Actually, I can't work out where it is. It's looking towards that hotel. So this is opposite that hotel. And if you consider now how much development has taken place since the 80s, well, it's 40 years ago. But, you know, this is what Pakenham looked like when I was a child. This is what Pakenham looked like until very recently. There was open space everywhere and kids could go and annoy the neighbours were riding on their trail bikes. And when I was at school, I remember, you know, the boys used to talk about going yabbying in the creeks around Pakenham. Well, I can't imagine kids do that these days, but it was a much different thing. That was the 60s, that's the 80s, and it's changed a lot then. But I think it's a sad thing that, whatever you want to think about trail bikes, and I'm not saying whether they're legal or not, but whatever it is, I think it's sort of a sad thing that, you know, these old gum trees are gone and so much open space is gone, and so much of this sort of casual sort of entertainment has gone, that you can't go ride your bikes anymore and things like that. But anyway, that's the way it is. And the landmark sculpture. This was a great photo, put up in 1991. This is on the corner of the highway. So that's the St. Patrick's Catholic Church here, the Anglican Church there. That's the Shire offices, the Pakenham Historical Society museum there. I just think, you know, these days the whole road will be blocked off and there'll be traffic guards, but here's a kid on a bike and a crane and a, you know, 3-ton slab of stuff, and no one cares about, you know, health and safety in those days. I'm not saying it's good, but just tells you how things have changed. So the landmark sculpture had a fountain, but I think too many people started putting detergent in the fountain, so they've turned the fountain off. And the library, so I have to go. I can't do a talk without a mobile library shop. This was the same sort of Pakenham mobile that went to Cranbourne, went to Bourke, used to go everywhere until the library, the static branches as we call it, were built. That's the first Pakenham library, just near where Target and Coles are today. As I said, no expense was spared when it came to aesthetics, obviously. It is the plainest looking building in the world, but never mind. And then this is the second library. And now, of course, we have our new library up here with the community centre in Pakenham and John Street and Henry Street. So, and just a quick look at Pakenham's population. So it's gone from 2016 is now 46,000, so it must be even more than that now. Interesting that Pakenham, I'll just have one little rant here. Pakenham High School was built in 1968 and moved to its new building in 1970. So in 1970, the population would have been around 2,000 people. And it's taken until now, there's now 46,000 people in Pakenham. It's only now that a second high school is built in Pakenham. I just think it's interesting that how little is spent on infrastructure in some of these outer suburbs. And I think there should have been another high school, you know, a bit quicker than what there is now, but that's beside the point. Anyway, so that's Pakenham's population, currently 46,000, but that was 2016. There'll be a census next year, so it'd be interesting to know what the population would be next year, and I'd say more like 50,000, 55,000, who knows. So that's the population and how we've grown, and you can see there, of course, between the 1990s to the year 2000 was really the growth area, the growth time in Pakenham. And as I said, when I went from being the country town that I knew, going to school at Pakenham Consolidated School in the 60s, to what it is now, which is you know, part of Melbourne. But I'm not saying there's no community now, because there's still a community in Pakenham, of course. But sometimes I get a bit nostalgic and think, you know, it's not the same Pakenham it was when I was a child. But of course, you know, new people move in and the new community groups are formed, and there's still a community spirit in Pakenham. And when it comes to living anywhere, it's a community spirit that counts. So that's good. Now, that's it. That's my last slide. So I'll stop sharing. Oh, stop share. There you go. Thanks for listening, everyone.